it's an issue, especially with new writers. And it's usually a big issue. And that issue is when writers write their story, and it can be a great story, but there are no stakes for the characters. No stakes for the characters. And I'm not talking about a T-bone here, and I'm not talking about the, kind where you jab somebody in the heart. Not that kind of stake. Hi, I'm Bardot. Welcome back to my channel. Good to see you. This channel is dedicated to writing tips, author tricks, and inspiration for living your best writing life. Okay, so let's get back to stakes. Oh, what do I have to say first? Oh, click that subscribe button and that notify button. By clicking, it helps me and other writers send this video higher into the algorithm so other writers like yourself can see it. And if you learned something new, if I gave you something to think about during this video, you're like, I can add some more, or I can add this, then I'd love if you'd give me a thumbs up. And as always, leave a comment. I always answer comments. Let's talk character stakes. You need them. You really need them. You absolutely, positively need them. But first, let's talk about what I mean by stakes. Here's my simplest definition for character stakes. And I always like simple definitions because complicated ones, I'm like, wait, what? So, simple definition. It's the bad thing that happens if the character doesn't do the thing they need to do. I'll say it again. It's the bad thing or the bad things that will happen if the character, the protagonist, doesn't do the things that they need to do. There can be all different kinds of stakes, and we're going to get into a few in a minute. They can be physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, financial, all kinds. It has to be bad. Bad. It's got to be bad. For example, and here are some examples. If the woman doesn't break the spell, then she dies, or is trapped forever in horror, or loses something, or loses her power, something like that. If the detective doesn't catch the killer, he's demoted, or sent to another precinct, or feels like he just doesn't have what it takes to be a detective. If the woman doesn't win the do or die contest, then she dies, or maybe her family dies. If a person loses their job, her family will be homeless, hungry, and poor. If the guy doesn't learn to do better at his job, he gets fired, loses his girlfriend, okay? If the woman doesn't get a handle on her out-of-control shopping addiction, she'll be broke, lose her home, lose her man. You get the picture. The person doesn't tell the truth, their future is ruined. So all different kinds of stakes. And if you go back, because I always say, like, look at your favorite TV shows. Look at even the series. Look at your favorite novels and look at the stakes and see how many different kinds of stakes there are and how many of the main characters and the bad characters, I guess that would be a main character, how many of them have stakes, because even bad guys have to have stakes, right? No stakes mean no tension, which means even if your writing is great, the story is or gets blah. Just, blah. No stake means no tension, which means a boring story. Stakes are very, very important. Stakes will keep the plot moving and engaging. It keeps the characters growing and changing. you know, that lovely necessary character arc that I'm always talking to you about. And incidentally, I go into a lot of detail about characters and character arc in my masterclass. There will be a link to that below. It keeps the characters growing and changing for the character arc, and then the character arc itself, it creates a character arc, the thing they have to learn to do or learn about themselves to become better people in the end. Stakes also help with pacing. That's how slow or how fast the story is moving. And stakes also build tension. They're so important. They're so critical. So as the story progresses, the stakes need to get higher, and it needs to get tougher and tougher to overcome the struggles. You got keep raising the stakes. So here's the thing. If there are no stakes for the characters, what's the point and the purpose of the story? Put another way, having stakes makes the story meaningful for readers. It keeps them turning the page, and it keeps them hoping for their protagonist's success, which are all super important. It makes the story matter. Stakes make the story matter. What do I care about some plot if there are no stakes for the characters? So what if they solve or don't solve the crime if there are no stakes for the characters? Like, what do I care? Okay, what do I care if he gets the boy or the girl or the new love or whatever? What are the stakes? Otherwise, why am I reading this, right? So I'm going to give you some examples of stakes in my stories, which are over there. So I've got some historical fiction. That's The Emperor's Assassin. And the stake is death. Nero will kill Locusta, his personal poisoner, or leave her in a dungeon to die, still death, right? If she doesn't become his poisoner, and then throughout the story, if he doesn't do exactly what he wants her to do. So, you know, some people got a horrific death, a lot of pain involved because he really hated them. She didn't like to watch that. And then there's other deaths where it was like, just make it a nice quick death. So she had to do what he wanted her to do, or there would be death for her because, you know, Nero. But she also had other stakes. I know you're thinking, what's higher than death at this point? Well, for her, it was a loss of love and her soul and her self-respect and a few other things that would be total plot spoilers, so I really can't say. But ultimately, yes, death. In Goddesses, Inc., which is contemporary urban fantasy, the fired goddesses, the stakes for the fired goddesses are living a mortal life without meaning, purpose, and hope. And ultimately, because they are now they are mortals and no longer goddesses, a much shorter life, which means ultimately they have X amount of years to live. So once again, there's death. In Impaler's Wife, Dracula's wife fears that her marriage will become broken and distant because of her inadequacies. And Vlad Dracula, of course, fears losing his land, losing his titles, living under the Sultan's rule, never getting out of political prison that he was in, unable to gain his rightful place as Prince of Wallachia, his personal vow to his family, and like a whole bunch more. So there were stakes involved if they didn't succeed. As I said earlier, the best way to figure out stakes is to look at a book you read or currently reading and figure out what the stakes are for each character. And now go to your own books, your current book that you're working on, and say, hey, what are the stakes here? And do I have any? If you don't have any, you need some. You need to get some. And they need to increase and change and definitely get worse, harder, higher stakes. Okay, the higher the stakes become as the plot moves along. So take a good look at your story and see what are the stakes. I read a perfectly delightful story a couple months ago. Yeah, a couple months ago, maybe a couple months back, and there were no stakes. It was an indie author, and there were no stakes, because if there are no stakes, really, like, an agent's not even gonna look at it. Like, they won't. And there were just no stakes for them doing the thing that they needed to do. And so for that reason, even though the story was well told and the writing was very nice and the plot moved along, I ultimately didn't care whether they solved it or not. So that's what drives your character, are the stakes. The stakes drive the character, drive the plot, drive the tension, all of that. Okay, that's it about stakes. There was a lot there. Need them. Gotta have them. They do all those fabulous things. Before I go, really quick pitch for my masterclass. It is the power of archetype and writing a more masterful sentence, and it will help you a lot with showing versus telling. Showing versus telling. So I've got the link below, and I think Udemy runs specials on it sometimes, so make sure you give that a check. And until next time, dream, create, and embrace. Bye-bye.